anything bugging you now?
No, I only hate it when,
Paul Newman called out 9 of the most openly racist actors he said he couldn't stand from Hollywood's so-called golden age, and he carried that truth for more than 50 years. Newman wasn't just a blue-eyed movie idol with charm. He spoke up when it actually cost something. While others stayed quiet to protect their checks, Newman marched beside Martin Luther King Jr. at the 1963 March on Washington. He even went down to Gadsden, Alabama to support desegregation when tensions were high and cameras weren't always welcome. He narrated civil rights documentaries and used his fame like a spotlight on injustice. Back then, speaking out could end your career fast. Richard Nixon even placed Newman on his official enemies list. Newman later said that was one of his proudest moments. But standing for justice meant he also saw Hollywood's ugly side up close. Behind polished smiles and red carpet waves, he worked with legends whose public images hid private prejudice. He saw which actors fought against integration, backed segregation policies, and used their clout to keep Hollywood closed off to people of color. One 3-time Academy Award winner was rumored to have reacted with shocking celebration when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Another famous cowboy star once told a national magazine he believed in white supremacy and never took those words back. These weren't random comments or awkward slips. These were powerful men making real moves behind the scenes. Roles were blocked, careers stalled. The industry was shaped in ways that pushed entire communities off the screen.
The reviewer to indicate that it was my obligation to steal the scene from The Bear would indicate that he really doesn't know anything about acting and doesn't really care about it. So,
for years, audiences watched movies that barely showed the real diversity of America. That wasn't random. It was controlled. Now the first name on this list might surprise you. His bias didn't come out as loud insults. It stayed polished, wrapped in patriotism and smooth interviews. Coming in at number 9, Robert Taylor. On the surface, he looked like the perfect classic Hollywood star. Dark hair, sharp features, calm confidence. Studios loved selling that image. Taylor was one of MGM's top names through the 1940s and 1950s. On screen, fans saw romance and bravery. Off screen, he made bold political choices. When the House Un-American Activities Committee started investigating suspected communist ties in Hollywood, most actors were nervous about being called in. Robert Taylor didn't wait. He volunteered. He appeared at those hearings and named colleagues he believed supported progressive causes, including civil rights efforts. Careers shifted overnight. There was no pause. Taylor also helped found the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, a group that pushed hard against progressive voices in Hollywood, including those speaking up for racial integration. This wasn't quiet talk. It was organized action. Reports say he even encouraged his studio to distance itself from writers he believed were too supportive of civil rights causes. In Taylor's view, backing equality for Black Americans wasn't seen as progress. He viewed it as suspicious and un-American. That thinking influenced real decisions with lasting impact. Newman stood for everything Taylor pushed against. One used his fame to demand fairness. The other used his influence to question and sideline people calling for change. It was a quiet war of values playing out behind flashing cameras and polished premieres, and Taylor wasn't moving solo. He wasn't the only Golden Age name who turned anti-communist panic into a tool against those fighting for racial equalities. Adolphe Menjou, a man who wrapped himself in the flag while drawing hard lines behind the scenes. In 1947, Menjou stood before the House Un-American Activities Committee and made it crystal clear where he stood. He once publicly claimed he was the most informed person in America on communism. That statement said more about his mindset than any facts ever could. On screen, Monjou built a solid career as a polished, refined character actor. Smooth voice, sharp suits, calm authority. Studios trusted him with roles that screamed class. But off-screen, he pushed just as hard against civil rights efforts, saying he was simply protecting the country.
Sat at the table, and the hair rose on the back of the head. And because, a band in Malta playing the Yellow Rose of Texas is something that you have to conjure with.
In his view, communist activity wasn't just politics. He stretched that label wide. If you supported racial integration, equal roles for black actors, or basic civil rights, you were suddenly suspicious. In Monjou's logic, believing in equal opportunity meant you were tied to something dangerous. That jump had real impact. He helped support blacklists that pushed artists out of work. Writers and actors saw opportunities disappear because figures like Monjou blurred patriotism with personal bias. Back then, being branded un-American could shut every door overnight, and that label was handed out fast. Newman saw the pattern clearly. He understood that patriotic talk was often used as cover. This wasn't just about communism. It was about keeping power locked in the same hands, keeping Hollywood structured the same old way while new voices struggled to break in. Monjou and Taylor leaned on politics as their shield. The next name didn't bother hiding behind hearings or committees. His controversies were tied to something far more disturbing. Number 7, Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling legend with troubling connections. On screen, Flynn was pure adventure, Robin Hood, Captain Blood. The fearless hero fans couldn't get enough of. He had the grin, the swagger, the sword fights that lit up theaters. He was electric. Researchers who examined his private life pointed to troubling links with Nazi operatives and documented racist views toward black and Jewish communities. Private letters and recorded conversations showed a man who believed in a strict racial hierarchy shaped by his upbringing in colonial Tasmania. Those ideas didn't stay locked away. They showed up in how he talked and how he treated people. Colleagues later described his casual use of racial slurs and his discomfort working alongside minority performers. On camera, the charm was smooth and effortless. Off camera, the energy could shift in seconds. He carried those views as casually as he carried a sword in his films, like Prejudice was just part of the costume. Flynn's image stayed polished by action scenes and that famous grin. But the next name might hit even harder. He was known as the King of Hollywood, and for years, stories about his political ties stayed low-key. Number 6, Clark Gable, the king with serious influence. When Paul Newman arrived in Hollywood in the early 1950s, one figure still dominated the industry. Clark Gable, the man behind Rhett Butler, the blueprint for the classic leading man. Studios built entire campaigns around him. Audiences admired him. His power in Hollywood was huge. What didn't always make headlines was how Gable used that power behind the scenes. He was a founding member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, alongside major figures like Walt Disney and John Wayne. This group didn't just exist on paper. It actively opposed progressive voices in Hollywood and resisted integration efforts within the industry. The Alliance claimed it was protecting traditional American values, but critics argued it also protected a system that kept Hollywood overwhelmingly white. Members supported blacklists and pressured studios when creatives were labeled too progressive. Gable stood aligned with that movement while playing heroic and romantic figures on screen. Publicly, he symbolized strength and charm. Privately, he supported circles that resisted industry change. Insiders knew where he stood, even if everyday movie fans didn't see that side splashed across headlines. Newman stepped into a Hollywood shaped by powerful men like Gable, a system built over decades where access was tightly controlled. Some critics argue the king's crown rested on a structure that kept others out, and that debate still hasn't faded. Number 5, Robert Mitchum, the tough guy who questioned history itself. Out of everyone mentioned so far, Mitchum is the one who actually shared the screen with Paul Newman. They appeared together in the 1964 comedy What a Way to Go, working side by side while Newman was heavily involved in civil rights activism. On screen, Mitchum had that laid-back, cool, heavy-lidded eyes, deep, steady voice. He built a reputation as one of Hollywood's ultimate tough guys. But in 1983, Mitchum gave an interview to Esquire magazine that left readers stunned. When asked about the 6 million Jewish people murdered in the Holocaust, he made comments that seemed to question or minimize the scale of that tragedy. The interview included anti-Semitic remarks and racially insensitive statements that shocked even the reporter sitting across from him. The reaction was fast and intense. Readers were outraged. Critics called the remarks careless and deeply offensive. Mitchum later tried to explain it away. He claimed he had been speaking in character from a recent film role during the interview. In a written apology, he described the situation as a tragedy of errors and suggested the journalist misunderstood his tone. But Esquire never pulled the story. They stood by every word printed. For many fans, that interview changed how they saw him. The relaxed rebel image suddenly felt darker. People started asking serious questions about what he truly believed and whether those views had always been there under the surface. Earlier in his career, Mitchum reportedly turned down a leading role in The Defiant Ones, the groundbreaking film about racial tension between two escaped prisoners chained together. His stated reason was that he didn't believe a black man and a white man would be chained together in the segregated South. Some colleagues viewed that explanation differently. They believed he simply didn't want to share equal spotlight with Sidney Poitier, who later earned major acclaim for the role. While Newman was marching in Washington and putting his reputation on the line for civil rights, Mitchum held views that would later explode into controversy. Their shared film in 1964 shows how divided Hollywood could be. One actor deeply committed to equality could stand next to another who would later question widely accepted history, and audiences would never see the tension behind the scenes. Before getting to the final names, it matters to understand who Paul Newman really was in that era. His activism wasn't trendy, it wasn't safe, and it wasn't for show. In August 1963, Newman flew to Washington, D.C. alongside Marlon Brando, Sidney Poitier, and Harry Belafonte. He stood in the crowd as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his historic "I Have a Dream" speech. But Newman didn't treat it like a celebrity appearance. He took it further. Richard Nixon placed Newman on his official enemies list. Instead of shrinking back, Newman wore it like a badge of honor. While several men on this list worked to protect a system that favored segregation, Newman pushed hard in the other direction. He was willing to risk roles, industry friendships, and his reputation to stand on principle. But even Newman may not have expected how deep some of these attitudes ran. These weren't just actors with quiet bias. For some, racism shaped how they operated in Hollywood every single day. Number 4, Ward Bond, one of Hollywood's most aggressive hardliners. On screen, Bond appeared in dozens of films, especially westerns, often in John Ford productions. To moviegoers, he looked like another rugged character actor from classic cinema. Nothing unusual, just part of the old studio system. Behind the scenes, it was different. Bond was a founding member of the Motion Picture Alliance and took that mission seriously. During the Blacklist era, he became known for pressuring others to cooperate with investigations. Colleagues described him as confrontational and intimidating. If someone showed sympathy for civil rights, integration, or progressive causes, Bond was quick to label them as un-American. He had strong allies. His close ties to John Wayne and director John Ford placed him deep inside powerful Hollywood circles. That kind of access mattered. When Bond spoke, studios paid attention. When he opposed someone, it could hurt their future in the business. Accounts from co-workers described his frequent use of racial slurs on set and his refusal to treat minority crew members with basic respect. Reports say he pushed hard to isolate or sideline people who challenged the racial structure of the industry at the time. Bond didn't whisper his opinions, he delivered them straight and loud. For many observers, he became a symbol of resistance to change in Golden Age Hollywood. While some actors kept controversial opinions private, Bond made his stance clear. He used his position to defend a status quo that limited opportunities for many voices. Newman's generation had to break through barriers built by men like Bond. Every move toward integration meant confronting a system guarded by people who saw equality as a threat. Bond stood like a wall, connected, vocal, and determined to hold his ground. Ward Bond enforced from behind the scenes. The next name didn't rely on pressure tactics. He said exactly what he believed in a national magazine interview and never backed away from it. Number 3, John Wayne, the cowboy who publicly declared belief in white supremacy. In 1971, at the peak of his fame, John Wayne sat down with Playboy magazine and said words that still echo decades later. In that interview, he stated, "I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility." Those words were printed clearly for millions to read. They weren't leaked years later or pulled from some hidden recording. He said them straight up in a national publication. In that same interview, Wayne defended the taking of Native American land, suggesting indigenous people were wrong to try to keep it. He dismissed the push for more diversity in Hollywood casting and showed no interest in changing the racial structure of the industry he dominated. He presented his views as simple common sense. That's what made it hit harder. What surprised many people wasn't just what he said, it was what didn't happen after. There was no massive industry fallout. His movies kept making money. He stayed a box office giant and a symbol of American toughness. The silence from much of Hollywood spoke loudly. Critics argued it showed how normalized those attitudes were at the time. Wayne also had influence behind the scenes. Over the years, reports claimed he resisted casting black actors in major roles and favored traditional choices that reflected his worldview. When he directed The Alamo in 1960, discussions about inclusive casting followed him, and many pointed to his public record on integration. Throughout his career, he consistently aligned with collaborators who shared his perspective. At the 1973 Academy Awards, when Sachin Littlefeather appeared on behalf of Marlon Brando to protest Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans, Wayne was reportedly furious backstage. Some accounts claim security stepped in to prevent a confrontation. Whether every detail is exact or not, the story lasted because it matched his public statements. His anger at Native activism didn't surprise people who had read that interview. Letters preserved later in his life suggested his views did not dramatically shift before his death in 1979. He never issued a formal apology for the Playboy comments. He never publicly retracted them. For many observers, that refusal became part of how history remembers him. Paul Newman and John Wayne worked in the same industry, but they stood worlds apart. Newman marched for civil rights and supported integration openly. Wayne criticized those movements and defended traditional hierarchies. Both were major stars. Both were celebrated. That contrast says everything about how divided Hollywood really was. Wayne spoke his beliefs out loud and kept his crown. But the final name on this list carries an even darker reputation, not only because of what he believed, but because of how he was rumored to react to one of the most painful days in American history. Number 1, Walter Brennan, the beloved grandfather figure with a complicated legacy. Walter Brennan won 3 Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor, a record that still stands. On screen, he played the warm, folksy elder. Audiences knew him as Grandpa Amos McCoy on The Real McCoys. He came across as gentle and harmless, Families invited him into their homes through their television screens every week. But behind that carefully built public image, former colleagues described a very different man. Brennan was linked to hardline political views and openly backed conservative causes in Hollywood. Some accounts claim that when news broke of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in 1968, Brennan reacted in a way that shocked people around him. The most repeated version of the story alleges that he celebrated the news. That claim has been debated for years, but it remains one of the darkest stories connected to his name. Even when details are disputed, what's clear is that Brennan strongly opposed the civil rights movement and integration efforts. His politics weren't quiet thoughts kept to himself. He supported groups that resisted progressive change and spoke openly about what he saw as government overreach. He wasn't subtle about it. The gap between his soft on-screen persona and his reported off-screen behavior stunned many who learned about it later. The gentle grandfather image didn't line up with the intense political activist described by insiders. That sharp contrast sums up this entire list: polished performances hiding fierce beliefs. Brennan's political views shaped much of his life away from the camera. He was a committed member of the John Birch Society, one of the most controversial far-right groups in America at the time. In 1968, he endorsed segregationist George Wallace for president, believing Richard Nixon was too liberal. 4 years later, he supported John Schmitz, another John Birch Society member known for firm positions. He didn't just quietly cast votes, he promoted these causes publicly. At a John Birch Society convention, Brennan recorded audio messages in character as Grandpa Amos McCoy, the same warm, grandfatherly voice that families trusted on television each week. Using that familiar tone, he claimed the civil rights movement was a communist conspiracy and argued that African Americans were being influenced by outside agitators pushing an anti-American agenda. Mixing entertainment with politics like that left critics deeply disturbed. He blurred the line between actor and activist. Some colleagues were taken aback. His show's producer, Sheldon Leonard, publicly referred to him as the racist Walter Brennan and made clear he did not share those beliefs. Writers who worked around Brennan later described his repeated use of racial slurs on set and his outspoken claims about white superiority. Those accounts painted a picture far removed from the kind grandfather audiences believed they knew. At one point, Brennan reportedly said the 1965 Watts riots could have been stopped with a machine gun. That statement alone shows how extreme his rhetoric could sound. His views were so rigid that he even labeled John Wayne, a figure known for controversial remarks, as too soft. That says a lot about where Brennan stood politically. But the story that most shadows his legacy centers on April 1968. When news broke that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated, the nation went into mourning. Cities grieved, churches filled. The entertainment industry paused in shock. According to multiple crew members from the set of The Guns of Will Sonnet, Brennan reacted in a way that stunned those nearby. Several accounts claim that when he heard the news, he expressed celebration instead of sorrow. Some reports even allege he laughed in response. The details have been debated over time, but the story has followed his name for decades because of how stark and unsettling it sounds. There are also claims that Brennan reacted in a similar way months later when Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated. While not every detail of those stories can be independently confirmed, what stands out is how strong and personal his opposition to the civil rights movement appeared to be. His stance wasn't casual. It ran deep. The contrast between Brennan and Paul Newman couldn't be clearer. Newman stood in massive crowds listening to Dr. King speak. He backed desegregation efforts in the South. He narrated civil rights documentaries and accepted the risk of being labeled un-American for supporting equality. Brennan, on the other hand, aligned with organizations that argued the movement was dangerous and misguided. Two actors, same spotlight, completely different moral paths. This wasn't just private opinion. These were influential men with huge platforms. They shaped casting choices, influenced studio culture, and helped decide which stories reached the screen and which never got the chance. For years, Hollywood often sidelined people of color or reduced them to narrow roles. That pattern didn't happen by luck. It came from decisions made behind closed doors, reinforced again and again. Paul Newman witnessed that system from the inside. He saw the glamour, the politics, the quiet gatekeeping, and the loud public statements. Instead of blending in, he pushed back. He chose to speak up when staying silent would have been safer. He chose to march when staying home would have protected his career. He showed that you could be a major star and still stand firm on principle. The 9 men on this list left complicated legacies. Some hid behind patriotic language. Some spoke their views openly. Some used quiet influence. Others said it loud in interviews and never took it back. Together, they shaped an industry that took decades to seriously confront its inequalities. Golden Age Hollywood wasn't just bright lights and red carpets. It was power plays, political tension, and moral crossroads that defined generations. If this deep dive into Hollywood's hidden history opened your eyes, make sure to like this video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more untold stories from entertainment's complicated past. And I'll see you in the next video.